Earth 1-99999 i.e., the Marvel Cinematic Universe, 2008, United States, New York City, Manhattan Island, Clinton District. The Clinton District is often colloquially referred to as Hell's Kitchen. On a commercial street near Clinton Park, an Asian teenager in his 18s or 19s hurried into the alley, took out a bunch of keys from his jacket pocket, and opened the back door of a small store. This Asian teenager, who was of average build and ordinary appearance, had a golden tattoo on the back of his right hand. The tattoo pattern was a large and 4 small 5-point stars, exactly the same as the 5-star red flag of China. After entering the store, this Asian teenager, who was suspected to be Chinese, quickly locked the back door, turned around impatiently, and went straight to the basement of the store. After the boy locked the door again, he walked quickly to the center of the basement, took off his backpack, and took out 6 apple-sized crystal balls from the bag. He placed them on the floor one by one with great care, as if these crystal balls were related to his life. Looking closely, these 6 colorless and transparent crystal balls were all the same size, but different from each other. There were different numbers of golden 5-point stars inside, ranging from 1 star to 7 stars, but 5 stars were missing. After placing the crystal balls, the boy opened his arms excitedly and shouted, "Appear, dragon, make my wish come true." A breeze blew by, and nothing happened. Don't worry about the details that there is no wind in the basement. The boy was stunned for a while. Then he slapped his forehead, squatted down, put his right hand with the 5-star tattoo and the 6 crystal balls together, and shouted again, "Appear, dragon, make my wish come true." This time, before he finished speaking, the light above his head suddenly flickered, and after a few flashes, it finally went out completely, plunging the entire basement into darkness. The next moment, in the pitch-black darkness, 7 bright white lights suddenly lit up from the floor, and the 6 crystal balls with different numbers of stars and the 5-star tattoo on the back of the boy's hand lit up at the same time, turning into 7 dazzling balls of light. Then, the 7 balls of light soared into the air, and in the blink of an eye, they merged into one, forming a glowing snake-shaped beast. The glowing beast looked vivid, with a body like a snake, horns like a deer, scales like a fish, claws like a phoenix, and paws like a tiger. It was the totem beast of China the dragon. So small, the boy pouted. Facing this legendary beast, he muttered to himself with disdain, "It's only a few meters long?" In the Dragon Ball animation, the Shenlong is the size of a planet. The dragon ignored the boy's mumbling, coiled its body and floated in the air, raised its majestic head high, and said mechanically, "Tell me your wish. Any wish can come true, but only one." The boy perked up and asked hopefully, "Can any wish really come true?" "Shenlong, of course." "Great." The boy clenched his fists with an excited look on his face and said shockingly, "Shenlong, please send me back to my original world." "Shenlong, sorry, I can't do it." The boy was dumbfounded, and it took him a long time to recover from the petrified state. He burst into swear words in frustration. "Fuck, then what are you bragging about? Can any wish come true? Shenlong, your body belongs to the Marvel world. I can't send it away, but if you only want to send back your soul, I can do it." Hearing this, the boy raised his eyebrows, became more energetic, and made a new wish. "Then, please send my soul back to my original body." "Shenlong, I'm sorry, I can't do that." The boy suppressed his surging anger and squeezed out 3 words from between his teeth. "Why?" "Shenlong, in the original world, you were already dead." The boy retorted unconvinced. "So what? Isn't resurrection your forte? There are no dead people in the Dragon Ball world." "Shenlong, but you are not from the Dragon Ball world. Only under the cosmic rules of the Dragon Ball world can I bring people back to life." The young man was silent for a long time, but still unwilling to give up, he asked, "Then, if you only send my soul back, can I occupy a dying body like when I came to the Marvel world?" "Shenlong, no, your soul has been integrated with the 5-star Dragon Ball. If you want to send it back to your original world, you must forcibly separate it, which will cause great damage to your soul. A damaged soul cannot occupy any body. It will only be destroyed over time." The boy was completely in despair. He fell to his knees with a bang and muttered to himself and collapsed like a loser. "I can't go back. I really can never go back. Dad, Mom, I'm an unfilial son." The boy cried loudly. His original name was Guron. Not only was he not from this world, but even the Marvel world and the Dragon Ball world were just fictional worlds from movies and animation to him. He never thought that one day he would come to the Marvel world as a soul with the 7 Dragon Balls from the Dragon Ball world. Guron, who was born and raised in China, traveled to the Marvel world and directly crossed the ocean to the evil capitalist base. Fortunately, the body his soul occupied was still a Chinese. Although he was not used to it first, after getting some memories of the dying original owner, he quickly adapted to the new identity Saint Li, a second-generation Chinese whose parents died in a plane crash, leaving him a small Chinese restaurant in New York. Gu Run, or Saint Li, thought he was still in the original world when he first traveled here, but just went back to 10 years ago through time and space. It was not until he saw a promotional video of Captain America and a piece of gossip about Tony Stark that he was shocked to find that this was the Marvel Universe with heroes everywhere and villains as numerous as dogs. Living in the United States in the Marvel world is dangerous enough. Unfortunately, Saint's home is in New York. New York, just from a Marvel plots that Saint knows, how many tragedies have happened in New York. Iron Man versus Ironmonger, Hulk versus Abomination, Captain America versus Winter Soldier, Shield versus Hydra, Avengers versus Aliens, Defenders versus Hand, and so on and so forth. There's simply too many to count. After knowing that he would live in the New York of Marvel world, Saint wanted to die, but he accidentally found a 5-star tattoo on the back of his right hand, and then he remembered that he came to this world with 7 Dragon Balls. According to legend, as long as you collect all 7 Dragon Balls, you can make any wish come true. In the process of crossing into the Marvel world, Saint's soul and the 5-star Dragon Balls merged into one another and became indistinguishable from each other. So in fact, he only needed to collect 6 of them. Relying on the close connection between the Dragon Balls, Saint went through untold hardships and spent more than half a month to find the other 6 Dragon Balls scattered nearby one by one, and finally summon the dragon. However, it turned out that Saint was too naive. In the center of the basement, Saint knelt on the ground, thinking of his parents who were separated by a whole world and would never meet again in this life. He couldn't help but burst into tears. At this time, the dragon, who had been completely forgotten, spoke again in a rigid manner. "Tell me your wish. Any wish can come true, but only one. Make your wish come true." Saint, who was extremely disappointed, was stimulated by the words, "Any wish can come true." He flew into a rage and waved his fist at the dragon fiercely. "Go to hell. You useless dragon who can only brag." This mini dragon looks real, but in fact it is just an illusory energy body. Saint's fist penetrated through it without any resistance, as if hitting the air. He used too much force and staggered, almost falling to the ground. In response, Shenlong had no reaction and just repeated, "Tell me your wish. Any wish can come true, but only one." Hearing this, Saint turned around, veins popped on his forehead, and he gritted his teeth in hatred. When violence was ineffective, he had to resort to cold violence. "Shut up. Leave me alone. Shenron, tell me your wish. Any wish can come true, but only one." Saint calmed down silently, no longer paying attention to Shenron, who was like a repeater, and began to think seriously about what wish to make. No matter what, life must go on. In the Marvel world, nothing is more important than the ability to save life, and powerful strength naturally becomes the first choice. Saint thought for a while and tried to make a wish. "Shenron, please grant me the power of Super Saiyan." "Shenlong, I'm sorry, I can't do it." Although he didn't have much hope in the first place, Saint couldn't help but swear again. "You useless dragon. What the hell can you do?" "Shenlong, according to the rules of the Dragon Ball world, strength can only be cultivated, not obtained out of thin air. As a creation of the Dragon Ball world, I cannot violate this rule. However, I can let you have the physique of a Saiyan without changing your appearance." Saint curled his lips. It was good not to grow a tail. He didn't have to worry about turning into a violent giant ape. However, the strength of the Saiyans lies in their bottomless potential and their cheating-like speed of becoming stronger. If he didn't know how to practice, this physique was useless. However, since he could directly change his physique without changing his appearance, Saint's eyes lit up, and he said to Shenlong, "Then please give me the physique of Majin Buu." Majin Buu, the final boss of the Dragon Ball world, can master any ability at a glance. As long as there is a cell left in his body, he can be immortal. He can even survive in space. With this abnormal physique, the Marvel world is like a cloud. He is not afraid of the destruction of the Earth. However, "Shenlong, I'm sorry, I can't do that." Saint was too tired to complain and didn't even bother to ask for the reason, so he just changed to a low-profile version. "So, what about the physique of Perfect Cell? It comes with its own little brothers, can survive in space, and can survive as long as the heart core is still there. Shenlong, I'm sorry, I can't do that. Saint reluctantly downgraded one more level. King Frisia's physique? Three-stage transformation, survival in space. As long as the brain is still there, you can live. Shenlong, sorry, I can't do it. Saint rubbed his aching forehead. If he downgraded again, he would only have the Namekian physique of Great Demon Lord Piccolo. Although he also has a good regeneration ability, it is really a bit weak. In comprehensive comparison, it is not as good as the Saiyan. He thought about it seriously, changed the direction, and asked, if I want to obtain a person's lifelong knowledge, can I do it? Shenlong, that's easy. Saint's mouth twitched, and he sneered. Now he felt that Shenlong was just bragging when he heard what he said. Shenlong, please give me all the knowledge that Sun Wukong has learned in his life. After saying that, Saint stared at Shenlong, waiting for him to say, sorry, I can't do that. Unexpectedly, the dragon nodded. Your wish has come true. Saint raised his brows and watched as the dragon immediately split into 7 streams of light after saying this. One of them sank into his right hand, and the remaining 6 dispersed and passed through the basement wall without any hindrance and disappeared from his sight. Obviously, it was the rule of the Dragon Ball world. After the wish was fulfilled, the dragon would split into 7 Dragon Balls again, turn into stones and scatter all over the world until it absorbed enough energy, and then it would turn into a Dragon Ball again. Where's the knowledge I promised you? Saint widened his eyes. Without feeling any changes in himself, he muttered to himself in disbelief. Did you really give it to me? He tried closing his eyes and immersing his mind in his thoughts. Saint immediately noticed the difference. The most obvious difference was that he felt the chi. Chi is the life energy contained in all living things. It can be said to be the foundation of the Dragon Ball world. From daily practice to the destruction of planets, everything relies on the human body's chi. Obviously, after obtaining all the knowledge of the protagonist of the Dragon Ball world, Son Goku, Saint immediately learned the most basic chi practice. In addition, Sun Wukong's extremely rich combat experience was also accepted by Saint. Of course, at present, he can only use fists and feet. With his chi at the frail level, let alone the famous Kameha, air dance, King Kai, and even teleportation, he can't even use the simplest Tamirian martial arts without practicing for 10 days or half a month. After drooling for a while with his eyes closed, Saint opened his eyes and looked at the 5-star tattoo on the back of his hand, which had turned gray. He couldn't help but mutter to himself, that dragon is a bit useless, but it's still reliable. I wonder when I can make a wish again. Due to the fusion of his soul and the 5-star bead, Saint knew instinctively that in the Marvel world, the recovery time of the Dragon Ball is proportional to the speed at which it absorbs energy. It is not like the rule in the Dragon Ball world that it takes a fixed year to recover. In other words, if the Dragon Ball is replenished with high-quality energy, it will recover quickly. If it is not replenished, it will never recover. Fortunately, the 5-Stars Pearl is truly in his hands. Even if the 6 Dragon Balls scattered around the world are not in places with abundant energy, Saint can actively look for energy for the 5-Stars Pearl to absorb. The 7 Dragon Balls are originally 1, and the energy obtained is automatically divided equally. If one is restored, all are restored. It is too early to think about these things now. Now, the top priority facing Saint is that he has no money. During the past half-month since Saint traveled to the Marvel Universe, he has been concentrating on finding the Dragon Balls. Not only has he not done anything serious, but he has also spent a large sum of US dollars to trade for the Dragon Balls that were picked up by others. He originally thought that he could return to his own world, but he had no idea of saving money at all. His savings have been burned out, and he is about to be so poor that he has no food to eat. I want to rob a bank. Saint walked out of the basement with his head down, listlessly, and of course, he was speaking in a discouraged tone. Although he had gained the combat experience of Sun Wukong, with his current ability, it was no problem for him to beat 2 or 3 thugs with knives, but if he faced a gun, he would have to kneel down in a minute. After a thorough search of the Chinese restaurant on the first floor and the living room on the second floor, Saint found a total of 135 US dollars, plus a few bills in his pocket. All his belongings totaled 242 US dollars. Looking at the closed door, Saint began to think, should he reopen the business? The question is, after the Chinese restaurant, which had few customers, was closed for more than half a month without any reason, would there be any business? Let's practice for a few days first. I'm too weak now. Saint shook his head with some worry. Although it was only 2008, the news of the rampage of the Hulk had not dominated the TV stations. Thor was still a prince in Asgard. Captain America was still sleeping quietly under the Arctic ice, and the whole Marvel world seemed to be very peaceful. But Saint knew in his heart that Tony Stark, who was just a super playboy, would be crowned as a superhero Iron Man in front of the whole world on a certain day of this year. Although he couldn't remember the exact time, Saint understood clearly that from that day on, the Marvel world began to become more and more dangerous. Superheroes and supervillains popped up like mushrooms after a rain, and even aliens of all kinds landed on the Earth in various ways. He only had a few months at most to become stronger and protect himself. And Saint, who was very afraid of death, decided to practice in seclusion immediately. He looked in the direction of the restaurant kitchen and said to himself, "There's almost a full bag of rice, and there's still a lot of meat in the refrigerator. It will last for 10 or 20 days. I don't have to worry about not having food to eat." 7 days later, Saint looked at the empty bag of rice in the empty refrigerator and wailed to the sky, "I'm not a Saiyan. Why did I become so greedy?" During the 7 days of retreat and training, a large amount of food was consumed, in exchange for which Shangta was promoted from a weakling to a weakling. If he stayed at home any longer, he would really starve to death. So Shangta decisively took his wallet and went out. He used the last $242 to buy all the rice, flour, and ingredients, and then cleaned the Chinese restaurant inside and out, intending to reopen the Lee's Chinese restaurant. The Chinese restaurant that Saint inherited was located at the intersection of 10th Avenue and 54th Street in New York, in the Clinton district, which was known as Hell's Kitchen. It was a good location with a relatively low crime rate. It was a good place for novice street heroes to level up and fight monsters. Saint, who was penniless at the time, had already made up his mind that if business was bad, he would have to put on a mask at night and go out to rob the rich and give to the poor. Well, rob some rich street thugs to help himself, a poor man. And Saint shook his head to get rid of those messy thoughts. When everything was ready, he opened the store door that had been closed for nearly a month before lunchtime and put a new sign at the door of the store from today on. "This store begins to provide Kung Fu barbecue." This gimmicky sign actually attracted customers not long after it was put out. With a dingling sound, a handsome young man with blonde curly hair pushed the door open with a curious look on his face. "Welcome." And Saint was excited and greeted the first customer with all his heart. "Please take a seat. What would you like to eat?" "I strongly recommend our newest dish, Kung Fu barbecue." Completely beyond Saint's expectation, the blonde curly-haired guy who walked in the door was obviously a typical European, but what came out of his mouth was fluent Chinese. "Boss, the Kung Fu you said, does it mean chi? You can use chi to grill meat?" Saint was shocked and stunned for a moment before replying in Chinese. The customer speaks Chinese very well, and he even knows chi, which really surprises me. "Huh." The little blonde curly-haired boy laughed proudly and stretched out his right hand and said, "Hello, I'm Danny Rand. I've lived in China for 15 years and just returned to New York recently." Saint Lee, "Nice to meet you, Mr. Rand." Saint gave his name and shook hands with Danny Rand. He appeared calm on the surface, but his heart was in turmoil. If he guessed correctly, the man in front of him was the heir of the Rand Group. Not only was he a billionaire, but he was also the strongest fighting force carefully cultivated by Kunlun, located in China, the immortal Iron Fist. In the future, he will become the Iron Fist, one of the 4 giants of the Defenders. Although he felt it was unlikely to be wrong, out of caution, Saint decided to confirm his guess and quietly activated the newly learned breath sensing. Sure enough, he found a very powerful chi in Danny Rand's body. Moreover, compared with the chi that Saint learned from the Dragon Ball world, the two were obviously completely different, yet they had many similarities, just like a pool of water with the same source, which created 2 streams with their own characteristics. There is no mistake. This must be the Iron Fist who learned the skills from China's Kunlun. No wonder he is so familiar with chi. It seems that he has not been away from the isolated Kunlun for long. He exudes a naive and silly energy. "Boss Lee, you haven't answered my question just now." "Excuse me, I'm really surprised." Hearing this, Saint came back to his senses, apologized, and nodded openly. "Yes, I can use you to grill meat." Danny Rand looked at him doubtfully and asked tentatively, "If possible, can you let me see it with my own eyes?" "Of course." Saint nodded slightly and pointed to a table in the restaurant. "Please take a seat. This dish is originally made in front of you. How many pounds would you like?" Danny Rand sat down obediently, picked up the menu on the table, and ordered dishes according to authentic Chinese customs. 2 pounds of beef, half a pound of white wine, and a pile of side dishes. Wait a minute, I'll be right there. Inzent walked into the kitchen, cut half a pound of raw beef, expertly shaved it into thin slices, greased it, sprinkled it with seasoning, and then served it on a plate, along with white wine and side dishes, and walked back with a tray. Seeing that he didn't bring the charcoal, Danny Rand couldn't help but ask, "Boss Lee, how do you grill meat without fire?" Insane smiled, put the plate of raw meat on the table, and said meaningfully, "Mr. Rand, you should be very clear about the power of chi. It is even more powerful than fire." Danny Rand was surprised and was about to ask a question when he saw Insane stretch out his right hand and place it above the plate of raw meat. As he moved, the air under his palm suddenly twisted. Then, a sizzling sound quietly rang out on the dining table. In front of Danny Rand's astonished eyes, the slices of raw beef on the plate were rapidly turning brown and curling up, and a rich aroma spread out and lingered in the air. Saint retracted his right hand, and in just a few blinks of an eye, the raw meat under his palm had magically turned into cooked food. This incredible ability was the most basic skill of Turtle Immortal Martial Arts Breath Release, which simply released the chi from the body to generate high temperature in the form of released energy. Wow! Danny Rand felt a wave of heat coming towards him, and couldn't help but exclaimed in amazement and said with wide eyes, "This is incredible. Please take your time." Saint looked very proud. It only took him a week to master the Qigong. He was naturally very proud of it, although because his own Qi was too weak, the distance of a Qigong could only be calculated in centimeters. "Please stay." Danny Rand called out to Insane, who was about to turn around and leave. He stood up from his chair and solemnly saluted. It was obvious that Insane's unique skill had won his respect. "Excuse me, let me introduce myself again. I'm Danny Rand, the immortal Iron Fist of Kunlun." Kunlun. Insane, who had guessed his identity long ago, pretended to be surprised, saluted in return, and made up a story for himself. "I've heard a lot about you. I'm Insane Lee, a disciple of the Kimiryu, and I've met the contemporary Iron Fist." Kimiryu. Of course, Danny Rand had never heard of the Kimiryu from another world, and for a moment he looked quite embarrassed. "Brother Lee, forgive my ignorance." "You're welcome. You can just call me Insane." Insane waved his hand and lied. "In fact, our Turtle Immortal School is just like Kunlun. We have been secluded from the world for many years. The degree of concealment is even better. It's normal that you haven't heard of it. Please don't mind it." "I see. Please call me Danny." Danny Rand nodded in understanding and asked respectfully, "Insane, you are so young, but you have already mastered the use of Qi to perfection. Are all the people in the Kimiryu so strong?" No. Insane quickly shook his head and told the truth. "Danny, you misunderstood. My Qi is actually very weak. If you summon the indestructible Iron Fist, I am no match for you." What this means is that if Danny Rand does not summon the Iron Fist, Inzantai can still fight. After all, the reason why the strength of their Qi is so different is because Danny Rand has the Iron Fist bestowed by Kunlun in his body. If this factor is excluded, the gap between the two should not be big, and their strength should at least be evenly matched. After all, although Inzantai is still very weak now, when it comes to the development and application of Qi, the Dragon Ball world is really far ahead of Kunlun. It is no exaggeration to say that Inzent, who had obtained the lifelong knowledge of Sun Wukong, stood on the shoulders of giants from the beginning. It was natural for him to defeat the strong with the weak. However, Danny Rand did not hear any hidden meaning at all. He glanced at the plate of barbecue on the table and said in disbelief, "Inzent, you are too modest. I feel that even if I practice for another 10 years, I can't do what you did just now. If it weren't for Sun Wukong's knowledge, I wouldn't be able to do it even if I practiced for another 10 years. Insane muttered in his heart and said, "I'm not being modest. I may be better than you in terms of skills, but for what I saw with breath sensing, if you count Iron Fist, the chi in your body is more than 10 times that of mine. This is a gap that cannot be made up by any powerful skills." Since sensing, Danny Rand's eyes lit up, and he was about to continue talking when he heard a dingling sound, indicating that a customer had arrived. Saint made an apologetic gesture, turned around, and greeted the customer. "Welcome. What would you like to eat?" A fat white man with a big belly was about to order food, but Danny Rand rushed forward, stuffed him a $100 bill, and said, "Sorry, this store is closed today." The fat man looked at the dollar in his hand and saw that the number on it was enough for him to eat 10 meals. He immediately turned around and left without looking back. Danny Rand closed the door and hung up the closed sign. He turned around and looked at Saint with a bad face and handed over a black bank card directly. "I'm sorry, please don't mind. I have something to ask you. I'm willing to compensate you for 1 month's income for taking up some of your time. That, is it a big deal to be rich?" Saint narrowed his eyes in dissatisfaction, rolled up his sleeves, stretched out his hand, took the bank card, and swiped a full 10,000 US dollars without hesitation. After handing the bank card back, he said, "In addition, you have to help promote my barbecue." "No problem." Danny Rand nodded happily and continued the previous topic, asking, "Excuse me, what do you mean by breath sensing you just mentioned?" "The so-called breath sensing." And Saint pondered for a moment, considered the words, and simply explained, "Any living thing has its own breath. Breath sensing is a technique of concentrating the mind and detecting breath, just like a biological radar. This is the unique technique of our turtle immortal style. That's all I can tell you." Hearing this, Danny Rand nodded thoughtfully, and after a moment of silence, he spoke frankly. "Actually, I left Kunlun without permission and did not complete the training required for the Immortal Iron Fist. I'm not very clear about a lot of knowledge about Qi. If possible, could you tell me more about some common sense that is not considered private?" Saint thought about it, and for the sake of $10,000, he asked without comment, "What do you want to know?" Although Danny Rand was a little naive, he at least knew the saying, "The way is not passed on to the inhuman, and the law is not passed on to the 6 ears." Seeing that Saint did not refuse on the spot, he was overjoyed and asked without shame, "I see that when you use the Qi to grill meat, you can control it freely and smoothly. However, it always takes me a long time to communicate with the Qi in my body, and sometimes I even fail. I want to know, is there any way to enhance my control?" Yes. Saint possessed Sun Wukong's lifelong knowledge. Theoretical knowledge certainly could not faze him. Under Danny Rand's expectant gaze, he calmly uttered 2 words, "Be beaten." "Be beaten?" Facing Danny Rand's questioning, Saint spread his hands and shrugged. "The more you are beaten, the faster your Qi defense will be. In the end, it will become completely instinctive. Using instinct to control Qi will be very smooth. So that's how it is." Danny Rand showed a nostalgic expression, muttering to himself, "No wonder Master Lei Gong always beat me when I was in Kunlun." Ahem. And Saint coughed dryly, woke Danny Rand up, and pointed to the dining table where the barbecue was placed. "Danny, let's sit down and talk. Do you have any other questions?" "Okay." Danny Rand sat down again, grabbed a piece of barbecue with his hand, put it into his mouth and chewed it, then gave Saint a thumbs up. "Delicious. Thank you." Saint also sat down, looked at Danny Rand opposite him, and reminded him seriously, "Don't forget to help me advertise." "Sure." Danny Rand wiped his mouth and continued to ask about the recovery of Qi. Recovering Qi. The two asked and answered each other, eating and chatting until dark. Danny Rand got up and said goodbye with a sense of unsatisfied desire. After Saint sent him out the door, he looked at the extra 10,000 US dollars in his account and smiled. Knowledge is wealth indeed. 10,000 US dollars is not a lot, but it is not a small amount either. With this emergency money, Saint finally doesn't have to wear a mask and go out to rob thugs on the streets. However, he accidentally met Kunlun's immortal Iron Fist. Saint doesn't know whether it is a good thing or a bad thing. His strength is still very low now, and he doesn't want to attract the attention of various forces. Originally, he planned to keep a low profile for a long time. At least, he would wait until he collected all the Dragon Balls for the second time and made a wish, then he could be a little more unscrupulous. Now, with Danny Rand involved, his Kung Fu barbecue, which was originally just a gimmick, would definitely be considered real Kung Fu by those who are interested, and it might attract some monsters. The Hand. When Saint thought of Kunlun's mortal enemy, an endless army of ninjas seemed to appear before his eyes. Driven by a sense of urgency, he said to himself, "It seems I have to practice hard." Although it was dinner time, Saint no longer had the mind to do business. After closing the shop door without hesitation, he went straight to the living room on the second floor and continued his retreat. The next day, Saint got up early but did not rush to open the restaurant. Instead, he practiced until noon and opened the restaurant before lunch. I don't know if it was because Danny Rand's advertisement had been promoted, but Lee's Chinese restaurant's business was particularly good today. Saint had only been open for 10 minutes when 3 tables of guests came. They were not regular customers. One table ordered a Kung Fu barbecue, and after seeing Saint's amazing skills, the other 2 tables of guests also asked for more dishes. Honestly speaking, The taste of Saint's Kung Fu barbecue is pretty good, but it can't be called top-notch. However, his Qigong cooking method, which is very performative, is truly amazing. All the customers who come in are conquered by this signature dish. They call their friends, and soon the seats in the store are full. For a short while, there was even a line at the door. In Xingte was caught off guard. He had to be a chef, waiter, and cashier all by himself. He was so busy that he barely made it through dinner time. He had to do odd jobs part-time. After cleaning up the store, he was just about to sit down and take a breath when the door rang again. Another customer came in. He had to hire someone to help. In Shengte gritted his teeth and stood up helplessly. He was about to say that the store was closed and he hadn't washed the dishes yet. But when he saw the person coming, he was stunned. The guest who pushed the door open was an Asian woman in her 20s, with a petite figure and a well-proportioned figure. Under her long, smooth black hair was a fair, soft, and delicate face. From the perspective of Chinese aesthetics, she was definitely a beauty picked out of 100. Saint was slightly surprised and immediately recognized the person. This was a longtime regular customer of Li's Chinese restaurant Kalinwen, a Chinese-Japanese mixed race who had lived in China for a few years and in Japan for a few years. She came to the United States in her teens and later settled in New York. Although she was small and inconspicuous, she was actually proficient in Aikido and Bushido and had extraordinary skills. She was a teacher at a nearby Japanese martial arts school. Wait a minute. Saint suddenly realized that this character seemed a little familiar. That's right. Colleen Wing. Isn't she the future girlfriend of Iron Fist, the street hero daughter of the dragon? Moreover, her master bow too is also one of the 5 fingers of the hand, but for a long time, she herself didn't know this. Saint, what are you staring at? Colleen frowned and looked at Saint strangely. Why do you seem not to know me? Saint came back to his senses and laughed dryly. How could that be? Colleen, you are so beautiful today, I am stunned. Colleen raised her eyebrows and looked quite surprised. When Saint's parents were still alive, she was a frequent customer of Li's Chinese restaurant. Although they didn't have much contact, she was very familiar with Saint after getting along for a few years. This boy, who was also of Chinese descent and 1 year younger than her, was obviously a little shy. He would never be as bold as he was today to praise her beauty. Out of curiosity, she couldn't help but ask, Saint, why has your store been closed for so many days? Is there something wrong? Saint stepped forward and answered half-truthfully, nothing, it's just that my practice has reached a critical point, and I have been practicing in seclusion for the past few days. Practicing? Colleen Wing was even more surprised and asked suspiciously, is your family a martial arts family? How come I don't know? Saint shook his head and brought out the same excuse he used to deal with Danny Rand yesterday. That's not the case. I have been a disciple of the Turtle Immortal School since I was a child, but I didn't practice enough before, so it was difficult to make it public. Turtle School? Colleen Wing looked at Saint with interest. What a strange name. Is it a sect in Chinatown? No. Saint shook his head again and asked, do you know Kunlun? Hearing the word Kunlun, Colleen Wing couldn't help but narrow her eyes, thinking of the weird Danny Rand, and nodded after a pause. I've heard of it. Saint had already lied to Danny Rand yesterday, so he lied more fluently today. We, the Turtle Immortal School, are a hidden sect just like the Kunlun. When I was a child, by chance, I met a Turtle Immortal who was in the secular world. He accepted me as his apprentice and taught me the practice of Qi. Immortal? Colleen Wing is half Chinese. Although she has lived in New York for many years and her Chinese is not very good, she still remembers the meaning of the word immortal. What a big tone. Saint shrugged his shoulders and boasted, he can fly. It's not an exaggeration to say that he is an immortal. Can fly? Colleen Wing took a breath. You mean through the practice of Qi, people can fly? That's right. Saint nodded. That is a very advanced Qigong called dancing in the air. However, my Qi is still very weak now, and I am not qualified to practice in the short term. Hearing this, Colleen was full of disbelief and questioned. How old were you when you met the so-called immortal? I think you were deceived, right? Saint smiled indifferently and did not argue with her. Words are not enough. You will know whether it is true or not in the future. Sooner or later, I will be able to fly. Come to my martial arts gym when you have time. Colleen raised her eyebrows and expressed her dissatisfaction on the spot. I want to see if you have learned real Kung Fu. Saint was just looking for someone to practice his moves with and test his skills, so he replied eagerly, I'm free now. Okay. The two of them hit it off immediately, and Colleen Wing turned around without even thinking about eating. Let's go. Saint took off his work clothes, locked the shop door, followed Colleen Wing across half a block, and soon arrived at her small martial arts gym. Colleen Wing walked to a corner of the martial arts hall, picked up 2 wooden swords, and asked Zent, "Do you use weapons?" "No." Zent waved his hand. "I only know how to use fists and feet, but you can use swords, otherwise it will be unfair to you." "Huh." Colleen Wing laughed in anger. She never thought that she would be looked down upon by Zent. She was determined to teach him a lesson. She walked forward with a wooden sword in her hand, stared at Zent with a bad look, and said, "Humph, you asked for this." It was Saint's first time in actual combat, so he was inevitably a little nervous. However, thanks to Sun Wukong's lifelong combat experience, he quickly calmed down, got into a starting position, and said, "Come on." "Huh." Colleen Wing let out a delicate cry and swung the wooden sword in her hand across quickly. But Saint followed the direction of her sword and took a big step forward, moving to the side where her sword could not reach. Then, a fierce elbow strike was delivered to her. What vicious punch and kick! Colleen Wing's eyes narrowed suddenly, and she quickly raised her left hand and pushed hard on the side of Saint's elbow. With this force, she took a step back to the side. However, before she could stand firmly, Saint's side kick followed her like a shadow. How could it be so fast? Colleen was horrified, with no way to avoid it. She had to hold the wooden sword with both hands to block Saint's kick. With a crack, wood chips flew everywhere, and the wooden sword broke in the middle. After breaking the wooden sword, Saint suddenly retracted his strength and did not kick Colleen Wing. Instead, he took a step back and bowed to make a gesture of acceptance. Colleen Wing's eyebrows were raised, and she walked to the corner of the martial arts hall without saying a word. She took out a samurai sword with a sheath from the box against the wall and pulled it out with a swish. She held it in her hand and danced with it, obviously recognizing Saint's strength and requiring her to go all out. Saint looked at the cold and gleaming sword flowers, and his heart inevitably sank. With his current chi, he could not withstand the sharp steel. If he was hit by a knife, he would definitely bleed. I shouldn't have provoked this crazy woman. Saint only regretted it at this time, but it was too late. Colleen Wing, with a sharp blade in hand, immediately rushed over. Saint did not dare to be arrogant. He stepped carefully as if walking on thin ice, constantly dodging the knife light, and was always looking for the opportunity to counterattack. As the saying goes, if you defend for a long time, you will lose. After Saint dodged more than 10 knives, his steps were inevitably disordered, and his whole body stagnated. Seeing this good opportunity, Colleen Wing's big eyes were shining, and she shouted and slashed him on the head. Being under the blade, Saint's hair stood on end. He tried his best to suppress the instinct to dodge. Instead of retreating, he moved forward, stretched out his right arm, spread his 5 fingers, aimed at Colleen Wing's towering chest, and shouted, "Rock, paper." A sudden strong wind blew in the sealed martial arts hall. Colleen Wing clearly saw that Saint's palm was still more than 10 centimeters away from her chest, but she only felt as if an invisible big hand was pushing towards her. A strong wind pressure first blew up her long hair and mesmerized her eyes, and then the 2 round hemispheres on her chest were pushed and deformed by an invisible force. At the same time, her feet involuntarily left the floor, and the whole person flew into the air and flew backwards. Colleen Wing, who was in midair, quickly overcame the panic in her heart, adjusted her limbs to find balance, landed steadily on her feet, and took 3 steps back. After releasing all the strength in her body, she covered her chest and felt it. She was immediately surprised to find that although she was hit hard and was pushed away, she was not hurt at all. Except for a slight soreness in her chest, the 2 most prominent points on her chest felt a little numb. After Saint pushed Colleen Wing away with a palm in midair, he felt weak all over. He could not help but put his hands on his knees, bent down deeply, and gasped for breath. Seeing Colleen Wing with an embarrassed look on her face, she raised the samurai sword in her hand again and quickly raised her arm and shouted, "Stop! I have no strength. Give up." Colleen Wing put down the knife in dismay and snorted. Unable to suppress her curiosity, she asked, "That was the Kamiria Qigong you learned?" Saint wiped the sweat from his forehead, straightened up with difficulty, and nodded, "Yes, that move is called paper, from rock, paper, scissors. This is the entry-level move of our Kamiria. Rock is boxing, scissors is fingering, and paper is palm work. Rock, paper, release the chi from the palm and transform it into a force." Initially, It can only be used to push the enemy away. After mastering it, it can be flexibly pulled or even restrained. Although it is an entry-level move, compared to the simpler basic skill Release the Breath, Rock, Paper, Release has the additional process of transforming force, and the consumption of chi is much more terrifying. The reason why Saint was so tired that he couldn't even stand steadily was because he used too much force and almost completely exhausted the chi in his body. Is it just an entry-level move? This Kamiryu is indeed quite powerful. Colleen, when subconsciously raised her hand and rubbed her sore chest, not noticing that her unintentional action made Saint stare with his eyes wide open. He felt dry mouth and wanted to shout, "Let go! Let me do it!" Saint used up all his willpower to look away and coughed. Ahem, now do you believe that what I learned is real kung fu? Colleen when curled her lips and thought to herself, if this is not real kung fu, then what is it that I learned? On the surface, she asked calmly, can anyone learn the Qigong of your Turtle Immortal School? Saint thought for a moment and answered ambiguously, in theory, yes, but it's very difficult. You must fully develop your own Qi. I have only recently mastered the basics. Colleen 1, who had defected from the hand from Kunlun, was no stranger to Qi. Her eyes lit up when she heard this. She was very competitive and was of course very interested in such a powerful Qigong. Then you think I can learn it? It should be okay. And Saint glanced at her and said, your Qi is actually stronger than mine, but you just don't know how to use it, so your strength and speed are not as good as mine. Colleen when raised the corner of her mouth and asked with a smile on her face, can you teach me? Or do I have to become your disciple? It doesn't have to be so grand as becoming your disciple. And Saint waved his hand, and in Colleen Wing's hopeful eyes, he suddenly changed his tone. Just be my girlfriend. Colleen Wing's smile froze, and she glared at Saint fiercely, pointed the knife in her hand at the door and said, get lost. And Saint smiled indifferently and walked to the door very obediently. Before leaving, he turned around and waved to Colleen Wing. See you another day, Colleen. TSK. Colleen, when watched Saint's back disappear out the door, curled her lips and spit, then suddenly chuckled. This kid has become more interesting than before, and his way of rejecting people is quite special. I wasn't going to have dinner with him. Well, forget it, it's already this late. Let's eat in the evening. On the other side, after leaving Colleen Wing's martial arts gym, Saint went straight back to his restaurant, then went into the kitchen, put on rubber gloves, and started washing dishes. I'm hiring. When Saint finished washing the pile of dirty dishes, he was exhausted. He wiped his hands and immediately made a job advertisement and posted it directly on the door of the store. This store is recruiting a handyman and a waiter and can provide food and accommodation. The salary is negotiable. At this time, it was very close to dinner time. Saint had no time to rest and started to prepare again. He had just finished preparing the dishes when he heard a dingling sound. A guest came in. Welcome. Saint came out from the kitchen and asked in surprise before he finished his sentence. Why are you here again? Can you talk? Can I come here to eat? Colleen 1, who had been hungry since noon, walked in unhappily. Then, she suddenly turned around and pointed at the job advertisement on the door and asked, have you hired anyone? How could that be possible? It was just posted a short while ago. Saint came forward and jokingly said, what? Are you planning to close the martial arts gym and come and work for me? Bah. Colleen when first muttered you wish, and then she said with a serious face, I have a student in the martial arts school, an orphan living on the street. Although she has a criminal record of theft, she is actually a good child, but she is just unlucky. Can I let her come to your place to be a waitress? Sure. When can she come to work? Saint agreed immediately. What a joke. Not to mention that he was just a harmless thief at this moment. As long as someone came to help him wash the dishes, he would dare to take in a murderer. Tonight is fine. She has experience as a waitress and can start working directly. I'll call her now. Colleen, when saw Saint's eagerness, took out her cell phone knowingly, walked away 2 steps to make a call, and soon walked back, holding up the phone in her hand. It's settled. She will be here in a while. Great. You've helped me a lot. Saint walked forward with enthusiasm. Come on, sit down. I'll treat you to a meal. Colleen when waved her hand. It's you who helped me. I'll treat you to a meal, but I still have to pay you. After Uncle Lee and the others left, it's not easy for you to be alone. No need. Saint waved his hand and said, my financial situation is pretty good. I have something you won't believe. Yesterday, I met a very rich sucker. Because he offended me, he insisted on compensating me for 1 month's income. Super rich. 1 month. Colleen Wen pondered these two key words and felt a sense of déjà vu. After a while, she widened her eyes and said, "You were talking about Danny Rand, right?" Hearing this, In Shengte was surprised. "Huh? How did you know? He also offended me a few days ago and compensated me for 3 months' rent for the martial arts gym." In Shengte was silent for a while, gritting his teeth and said hatefully, 3 months? This bastard who values women over friends. He only compensated me for 1 month. Colleen Wen looked at In Shengte speechlessly for a long time, surprised at his strange focus, and did not mention the matter of giving money. She sat down at a dining table and said, "Hey, are you going to treat me to a meal or not?" "Of course I will." Insane came back to his senses and asked, "Are you eating the same ones you usually eat? Or how about trying the Qigong barbecue I just invented?" "Okay, let's try it." "Okay, right away." Insane quickly brought a large plate of cooked raw meat and grilled it with Qigong in front of Colleen Wing. Although she had seen rock paper in the martial arts hall, Colleen Wing couldn't help but marvel at the completely different breath release. "Awesome. What is this move called? How is it done?" "This is actually just basic skills, not a special move. It's called breath release. The principle is very simple. Qi is a kind of life energy. Releasing energy will produce high temperature. Grilling meat in this way can also be considered a kind of practice. It allows me to control Qi more precisely." Insane explained briefly, handed over the knife and fork, and said, "Try it. Then I'll start. Please, I have to serve the guests and won't stay with you for long. Go ahead, don't worry about me." As mealtime approached, the restaurant was filled with guests one after another, and Saint began to be busy again. Fortunately, after the busy lunch, he was well prepared this time, which reduced a lot of workload. After eating the barbecue, Colleen Wing generously lent him a hand, and then a short-haired girl of about 17 or 18 years old also joined to help. Saint saw it and knew that this was the apprentice of the martial arts school that Colleen Wing mentioned. Looking at her skilled appearance, it was obvious that the job of waitress was not unfamiliar to her. With two helpers, Saint felt much more relaxed. Before he knew it, he had made it through dinner time. After seeing off all the customers in the store, Saint hung up a sign that said it was closed for business and called out to Colleen, the gentle short-haired girl, saying, "Stop busying yourself and sit down and chat." The three of them sat opposite each other. Saint glanced at the short-haired girl and spoke first. "Hello, I'm Saint Lee, an old friend of Colleen." The short-haired girl was a typical European. Her delicate facial features looked a bit like Germanic. She had a thin face, a slender figure, pale skin, and a frail appearance. However, her eyes were full of unyielding strength, which gave people a contradictory sense of beauty. What was even more strange was that her shoulder-length hair was a dark color that was completely inconsistent with her race. She looked at Inzent with a pair of big green eyes, not without caution, and introduced herself sparingly. "Lorna Lanchel." "Can I call you Lorna?" Saint asked tentatively. After seeing Lorna Lanchel nodded, he continued, "Lorna, I can offer you a monthly salary of 1,500, 3 hours of work at noon and at night, and free food and lodging. By the way, since we are still short of handymen, if you are willing to take over this job temporarily, I will also add a subsidy of 8 per hour. Please consider it and see if there is any problem." As an orphan, Lorna Lancher had been working on the streets very early. She knew that Saint's offer for a waitress job was already quite generous. Moreover, because she had a theft record, no one was willing to hire her. She immediately nodded in agreement. "No problem. I'll accept the job, and I'm willing to do some odd jobs to earn some extra money." "Okay." And Saint nodded and turned to Colleen Wing and said, "Colleen, what do you think?" "I have no objection." Colleen Wing smiled and said jokingly, "I don't think you dare to bully my students." "Haha, that's settled." And Saint laughed dryly, then stood up and solemnly extended his right hand to Lorna Lanchel. "Lorna, welcome to join the Lee's Chinese restaurant." Lorna Lanchel was stunned for a moment. Then she stood up and shook hands with Saint with her fingertips. "Should I call you boss?" "Whatever." Saint shrugged indifferently. "We're just a small shop. There are not so many rules. You can call me boss, or you can call me Lee, or just call me Saint by my name." Lorna Lanchel was silent for a moment, tilted her head, and said, "I'd better call you boss." "Okay." Saint nodded, hesitated for a moment, and asked, "Lorna, do you live outside by yourself, or?" Hearing this, before Lorna Lanchel could speak, Colleen Wing rushed to say, "Saint, she has no place to live. You have to arrange a dormitory for her." Sun Se, pronunciation of master, In Japanese, Lorna Launchell turned away somewhat embarrassedly and said to Colleen Wing, "It's okay for me to live outside. I can protect myself." "No," Colleen Wing glared. "Is it fun to live in an abandoned building and be chased by the police? Do you want to add a criminal record for trespassing?" Being exposed by her one after another, Lorna Launchell was completely embarrassed and turned her head away stubbornly. "Saiyan, SEI. It's my freedom to live wherever I want. You can't make the decision for me. You still remember to call me Sien, SEI. Ahem. Colleen, don't be in a hurry." Seeing that the situation was getting out of control, Saint coughed dryly and tried to smooth things over. "Lorna, how about this? I'll arrange a room for you on the second floor of the restaurant. You can use it as a lounge for the time being. As for whether to live in it as a dormitory, you can make a decision slowly later. How about it?" Lorna Launchell nodded silently, stole a glance at Colleen Wing, who looked a little unhappy, and took 2 steps away as if escaping. "Boss, there are still a few tables that have not been cleaned up. I'm going to work first. Go ahead, clean up, wash the dishes, and then you can go home." "Okay." When Lorna Launchell walked away, Saint looked at Colleen Wing strangely and whispered, "What's the matter? Colleen, is your reaction too big? This is not like you at all. You don't know." Colleen Wing curled her lips as if she had something to hide. "This child is quite special. It is too dangerous for her to live outside alone. She will be targeted if she is not careful." "That's true." Saint thought of Lorna Launchell's exquisite face, which was indeed very stunning. He agreed and said, "Such a beautiful girl is indeed more likely to get into trouble." "That's not what I meant." Colleen Wing shook her head irritably, hesitated for a moment, leaned close to Saint's ear, and whispered, "She's a mutant." "Mutant? Lorna Launchell?" Saint only felt a buzzing sound in his head and subconsciously muttered to himself, "No way." Seeing his reaction, Colleen Wing frowned. "What do you mean? In my impression, you have always sympathized with the plight of mutants, so you were willing to tell you." No, you misunderstood. I don't mean to discriminate against her." Saint waved his hands and said thoughtfully, "I just suddenly remembered a mutant with the same surname, Launchell. Eric Lenscher, the famous Magneto, is a godlike existence wherever there is metal. However, this is impossible because Saint had done a detailed investigation when he first came to the Marvel world. Although there are mutants in this world, they are completely insignificant. There is neither X-Men nor Brotherhood of Mutants. In fact, under the ubiquitous surveillance of S.H.I.E.L.D. and the unremitting suppression of the Sentinels, it is impossible for mutants to form a decent force. If this is the case, Magneto, the leader of the Brotherhood, should not exist. Otherwise, with Magneto's unruly character, how could he not cause trouble? So, in this case, where did Magneto's youngest daughter, Lorna Launchell, whose mutant abilities were the same as his, come from? Was it just a coincidence? Zanny himself didn't believe this statement, and curiously turned on the breath, sensing and probed towards Lorna Launchell. The next moment, in the surprised eyes of Colleen Wing, Zanny, who was inexplicably stunned, suddenly trembled all over, and big beads of cold sweat dripped on his forehead. "What's wrong with you? Oh my God, such a strong Saint could not hide his shock, and he did not even bother to respond to Colleen Wing's concerned inquiries. In his perception, Lorna Launchell, this weak little girl, had an chi in her body that was completely different from that of ordinary people, and the strength of this chi was 50 times that of his own. If the chi of an ordinary person is 1, then Saint's chi is 2, and Lorna Launchell's chi is 100. With the strength of 1 against 100, she is worthy of being the North Star Lady. "What are you talking about?" Colleen Wing frowned and pushed Saint hard. "What strong chi?" Saint swallowed hard, looked at Colleen Wing silently with an indescribable look, and said madly in his heart, "Naive mortal, you know nothing about real power. You're still worried that Lorna will be in danger? She can beat dozens of you. Colleen, you worry too much. Lorna is very strong. Ordinary people can never be her opponents." Upon hearing this, Colleen Wing showed an expression of, "Are you an idiot? Nonsense. She is a mutant. I'm not worried about her getting hurt, but about her hurting others. Once mutants awaken, they will immediately gain very powerful abilities. Due to the sudden change in their bodies, it will naturally be difficult for them to adapt. Basically, all mutants will have varying degrees of loss of control when they are emotionally excited." Saint understood immediately. "Oh, are you worried that her abilities will get out of control and even cause casualties, and she will be wanted by S.H.I.E.L.D. and the Sentinel Service?" "S.H.I.E.L.D.? Colleen Wing frowned again. I know the Sentinel Special Service, but what is SHIELD? Damn. Spoiler. Saint then remembered that unlike the Sentinel Special Service, SHIELD is known for its secrecy. Ordinary people have no way of knowing it. He didn't know how to answer for a moment, so he simply pulled out the long and smelly name and explained perfunctorily. It's the abbreviation of a Strategic Homeland Defense Attack and Logistics Support Agency. What bureau? Colleen Wing was confused and blinked suspiciously. You didn't make this up, did you? Huh. And Saint smiled playfully. It's true. I can only say that the person who named it really wanted their abbreviation to be spelled as SHIELD. She's weird and strange. Colleen Wing curled her lips and brought the topic back to the point. Let's talk business. You have to let Lorna live here as soon as possible. I'm really worried about her wandering the streets alone. Aren't you afraid that she will lose control and tear down my shop? Saint rolled his eyes. Although he was a little reluctant, he didn't say anything definite. I'll try my best, but I think she is just like you, with a stubborn temper. I can't promise you anything. What do you mean by the same as me? That's redundant. Colleen Wing rolled her eyes at Insane and said, I'm going back to the martial arts gym. You can handle it yourself. Insane nodded, and after watching Colleen Wing leave, he found a bunch of spare keys and threw them to Lorna Lanshow, saying, these are the keys to the store. The big one is for the front door, and the small one is for the back door. When you finish work, remember to lock the door. Oh, by the way, work starts 11:30 tomorrow morning. Don't be late. After that, without paying any attention to the dumbfounded Lorna Lanshear, Insane went straight up the stairs and went to the living room on the second floor of the restaurant. He did not mention the accommodation at all. If Colleen Wing, who had not walked far, knew this, she would definitely be angry with him. What a weird guy. Lorna Lanshear looked at Insane's back disappearing at the stairs and couldn't help but frown and muttered, Aren't you afraid that I will steal things? Because she had a criminal record for theft, Lorna had seen many people who treated her as a thief. Even if some people didn't say it on the surface, they couldn't be as careless as Insane. You know, she clearly saw that there were hundreds of dollars in cash in the restaurant's cash register. However, Insane not only didn't guard against her at all, he even gave her the key to the store.